The city stretched out like a dim ribbon, everyone rushing about with faces pressed smooth by polished introductions, jobs, titles, achievements. He moved a step slower through that crowd. Once an old teacher had told him, "People don't fall in love with your face or your words. If they fall in love, it's for two simple reasons. They feel seen or they feel safe." Back then, he nodded politely. But as he stepped into rooms filled with chatter, yet heard only silence in people's hearts, the words clung to him like thread. In a small tea shop, the yellow light seemed to breathe. She sat across from him, eyes shifting as if afraid to reveal a crack. "I don't know why I'm always so tired," she said, forcing a polite smile. He didn't rush to give advice. Instead, he let the space between them widen, enough for words to fall without breaking. She spoke of days spent performing "I'm fine" for coworkers, of adjusting her posture, rehearsing her laughter, building walls of "don't worry" until she could barely breathe. Then suddenly she exhaled, a real, deep breath, like laying down a nameless burden. He knew. Sometimes love begins not with fireworks, but with a single exhale. Not with a sudden spark, but with the quiet permission to simply be. He didn't say much. He didn't need to display knowledge or wave quick fixes. He listened with a silence that carried weight. When she looked up and met an unjudging gaze, it felt as if a warm room opened inside her. In that room, she didn't need to perform or choose the right answers. She spoke truths long locked away, and what surprised her wasn't his advice, it was how she herself felt when speaking. Less guarded, less defensive, a calm seeping through her body. He remembered, people don't truly love your story. They love their own story when you're part of it. But he wasn't just a mirror for wounds. He learned to mirror light, too. "Hearing you talk, I think you're very brave," he said softly. Not empty praise, but pointing to the road she had walked. He asked, "When you dare to tell the truth, even at the risk of being misunderstood, how does your body feel?" She paused, then answered, "My heart still pounds, but I don't run." For a moment, her eyes steadied. People don't want to be tolerated. They want to be seen as valuable, as capable. And when being near him made her braver, calmer, closer to her best self, that was when the strongest bond was tied. Presence, he learned, is not about filling silence with noise. It is about holding space steady enough for trembling truths to stand upright. Not rushing to save, not fighting to be right, not making himself the center of someone else's story. In silence, there is strange power. It lets the armor fall away so truth can introduce itself. That isn't a performance meant to capture hearts. Real love doesn't land on the one who tries hardest. It seeks the one who is most deeply present, who doesn't flinch at truth, doesn't panic at messy emotions, who lets you feel lovable even when unimpressive. In the following days, he noticed hair-thin signals he used to miss. The way he spoke to himself after forgetting an appointment, was it scolding or gentle? The way he entered each morning, in a frenzy or calmly like pouring water? When someone asked a favor that cut into his rest, did he force a yes to stay likable or a truthful no to guard his breath? He realized others read us faster than we imagine. They don't need slogans. They feel the tone of a life, either solid or shaky. And that tone is the invisible script teaching others how to treat us. One day, a call came from an old friend who often relied on him at the last minute. Instead of agreeing with hidden frustration, he replied calmly, "I can't help this time. I need to keep my evening for something planned." Silence on the other end. No anger came, just a wrinkle of surprise, then nothing. He hung up and sat quietly. A quiet kind of self-respect was growing. It didn't wear expensive clothes, didn't shout. It was the background voice of small acts, how he ate, how he walked, how he kept a promise unseen. He also remembered times he had abandoned himself, laughing off insults to keep peace, lowering his standards to be lovable, saying "I'm fine" when every cell said enough. Each time, the world, like elastic, noticed the softness of his boundary and pushed further. Not because people were cruel, but because he had allowed it. Boundaries, he understood, are not barbed walls. They are bright lines preventing missteps. Drawn with trembling hands, they invite testing. Drawn with steady hands, they invite either respect or retreat. Both are wins. Another evening, he returned to the tea shop. She sat at the same table, looking more rested. The conversation wasn't as heavy. Between pauses, they heard spoons touch porcelain. "It's strange," she said. "I've stopped trying to impress, and somehow I feel less tired." He smiled. Some beauty only appears in stillness, like a lake when wind subsides. He told her about his practice of keeping promises to himself. A 10-minute walk even under gray skies, a page of journaling despite chaos, saying no when peace was at risk. Not to become someone else, he said, but to remind myself I already am. She nodded. Her eyes no longer asked permission to exist, they began to declare it quietly. Since then, he didn't pour concrete around himself to resist life. He loosened space for truth and tightened space against compromise. When conversations drifted into performance, he steered back to living. Can we slow down? When jokes crossed his line, he shifted tone. That doesn't work for me. He noticed those who needed games drifted away, those who needed truth stayed. Love, he saw, doesn't require thick scripts, it requires space. In that space, no one must be perfect. They only need to feel safe not to hide and seen not to vanish. Once she asked, "So what do people love about you?" He paused before answering, "Maybe not me. Maybe it's themselves when they're with me." They both laughed. It sounded paradoxical, yet it struck the center. We don't remember clothes or quotes, but how we felt beside someone. A peace that doesn't impose, a calm gravity that needs no proof. Of course, he still had days of breaking small promises, filling silence with jokes, or craving approval. In those moments, he didn't condemn himself. He simply noticed and returned to the slower rhythm. Self-respect isn't a trophy held once, it's the small habits repeated in the dark. Others sense that tone and adjust their distance. Either they draw near with the same quality, or they walk away, both right in their own way. He realized a quiet truth. When you chase love, it means you already believe you're not enough. That energy is heavy, fragile, turning every gesture into performance. In contrast, when he stood firm in a self cared for by small acts, he didn't need to call connection. It came like iron to a magnet. Not because he was more attractive, but because he no longer needed attraction to rescue him. Night fell, streetlights stretching long shadows. He walked her to the door. They exchanged a small nod, nothing dramatic. On his way home, he thought about the word legacy. Perhaps legacy isn't dazzling words others repeat, but the quiet peace you plant in their hearts as you pass. He laid a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady like a drum tuned right. From tomorrow, he would keep living this way, holding space for truth, keeping promises to himself, and keeping rhythm for those who just need a place to breathe. The story wasn't ending here. It had just reached a turn, leaving behind the urge to be chosen by performing and stepping into the path of alignment with what was deepest inside. From there, what needed to arrive would arrive. What needed to leave would leave. And he would learn the rest: how not to chase, how to hear stillness, how to stand beside others without making them smaller, so that love, if it came, would bloom as something in its rightful place. From that day on, he began to move more slowly through life, no longer chasing approving glances, no longer punishing himself for borrowed standards. He realized when he tilted off balance, others would mirror that tilt. But when he stood firm, the world shifted naturally around him. One morning while pouring tea, he thought of an unspoken law. The way you treat yourself becomes the draft others follow. He remembered a night when he forced a smile and took on more work, though he was already exhausted. The next day, colleagues piled on even more. Not because they were cruel, but because he had sent the signal: my boundaries bend easily. He saw clearly. Every small act, a self-mocking joke, a weary compromise, was a message. Others might not name it, but they felt it. From then on, he set a rule. If he promised himself a 15-minute walk, he walked, even in rain. Not to be seen, but to let his heart record. I keep my word. When he looked in the mirror, instead of frowning, he offered a gentle smile like greeting an old friend. When he made mistakes, instead of scolding, he said, "Next time, I'll do better." The way he spoke to himself became the tone of every other conversation. People around him began to shift. A colleague who used to dump extra tasks stopped after hearing his calm, firm refusals. A friend who once teased too harshly softened under a steady but kind gaze. He discovered, even without commands, we teach others by how we are present. Yet some people stepped back. The woman at the tea shop appeared less often. He didn't blame her, nor cling. He knew, if she stayed only because he bent himself to ease her comfort, that love would never stand. True companions don't ask you to shrink so they can stand tall. Thinking this, he felt light. One evening on his balcony, he asked himself, "What is love, really?" He recalled his teacher's words, "If you are chasing it, you already believe you are not enough." Each time he longed to be chosen, he felt himself wobble. That restlessness weighed down every gesture, turning his eyes into pleas. Validate me, love me, so I can feel worthy. But real love doesn't bloom in scarcity, it grows from wholeness. So he practiced sitting alone with himself. At first, silence pressed like stone, his heartbeat racing from the habit of needing voices. But slowly, silence became an ally. He discovered, if he couldn't endure his own stillness, he would always seek others to fill it. And each time mistake it for love, when in truth it was only a pause from loneliness. As months passed, he noticed the most precious things were quiet. Self-respect doesn't shout, but everyone hears it. It showed in the way he declined gently, kept his promises, and walked each afternoon. That steady calm radiated, not to attract, but to awaken. People felt lighter near him, less pressured to perform. They didn't love him for what he gave. They loved the forgotten parts of themselves they remembered in his presence. A new friend once said, "When I'm with you, I don't feel the need to prove anything." He smiled. That was the lesson he had learned. Stop performing, start being present. In such presence, love, if it came, would find its way. Once a relationship ended. The other said, "You're not like you were in the beginning." He didn't beg. He knew, in the beginning they loved the version of him bent to be lovable. But as he straightened, they found him unfamiliar. It hurt, but he bore no grudge. Because the truth was, real love never asks you to contort your shape. If someone leaves when you are honest with yourself, they were never in the right place. So he lived with greater clarity. He refused to let small promises erode. He refused to let false laughter cover fatigue. He refused to accept fragments of affection out of fear of being alone. He guarded his peace like breath, and in that calm, he no longer needed to beg anyone to stay. Those who stayed, stayed as themselves. Those who left, left to make space for souls more aligned. He saw a paradox. When you no longer need to be chosen, you become the choice. When you stop proving worth, others begin to treat you as inherently worthy. When you stop chasing, you finally allow love to arrive right, whole, unforced. On the last night of summer, he sat by the window, listening to wind sweep through. The city still roared outside, but inside him stretched a still lake. He no longer asked, "When will love come?" He simply kept the water clear. He understood. Love doesn't come because we pound on its door. It comes because we leave the door open, with peace, with self-respect, with presence. And if someone walked in, they wouldn't see a man striving to be lovable. They would see someone already living true to himself. In his gaze, in his silence, in each breath, they would sense, "Here I am safe. Here I am seen." And that, he knew, was love.